YouTube, it's Matt with Olympus Reptiles. It is time for the interview portion of the reptile news that we are very, very happy to have finally resurrected. And for our first ever video, we'll call it season number 2. We really don't have seasons, so we feel like doing it. We are with DEA Exotics. And I'm really happy to do this because I talk to him all the time. You do a lot of live camera stuff, so I'm in there quite a bit. It's a lot of fun. But are you ready? Are you ready for this interview?
I'm ready.
I'm going to warn you, this will be the most intense, hard-hitting interview of your life. We're going to dig into aspects that nobody else will dig into. We are a very official and thorough news source, if you could believe that. And our first question for you is your biggest success in reptiles. What do you think is your biggest success in this entire industry hobby?
I'm going to say my ability to stay in it for so long. Most people, I'm serious, because most people only last a short time and then they're out. I've been doing this for over 35 years.
Yeah. Whoa, we got attacked by cats. Sorry about that. Go away, cats.
I used to run a pet store, and when we used to get like ball pythons and stuff in, you just got a big box of ball pythons.
Right.
Nobody looked for anything different, and that's, 35 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm not chuckling at it being funny. I'm chuckling. It's quite the accomplishment because I see so many people, come and go in reptile breeding, especially. One of the things we always talk about is, they come in and they burn real hot real fast and acquire this massive collection really fast and invest all this, and then they're out of it in a short time because it almost turns into this crushing thing.
Yep.
So it is very hard to maintain and grow and just, go through the good and the bad for sure. But that brings us to my next question. I think this one's always a little bit harder for people, and that is, what is your biggest failure in reptiles?
I would say I used to have a huge collection of Burmese pythons and retics. Used to breed them. And then I moved, and I sold it all off and had to start all over again.
Oh.
So that would be the biggest one.
So just because you had to get rid of them, I mean, do you wish you would have kept them and find a way to move them, or was it just the fact that you had to move?
No, it was if I could have kept them and moved, I would have done so. But at the time, I couldn't. So, I moved all the way across the country, so that's what the problem was.
Kurt's going to go beat cats, I think. My wife's cats are making all kinds of noise. They're crazy. So losing the collection is always hard, but it seems like a lot of people I talk to have had at a life event that has caused them to lose a collection or downsize, making it really difficult. Yep. But that sad note brings us to our first random question. Okay. So let's see what my Vikings Cup, us Viking fans, we've never won anything in our life, so that's why we put the questions in here. One of these days we'll be Super Bowl champions. Make it this year, Mike Zimmer. Question number 1. Oh, I'm sorry. Question number 1 for your random question. Are natural male enhancements worth the money?
I don't know. I'll have to buy some, and then I'll have to ask my wife.
Okay, we'll get a report back from her later, I guess, on that one. So you mentioned a little while ago you used to own a pet store, but I want to know how you got your very first start in this hobby.
Okay, well, my very first start was I hung around this guy. His name was George. He was way older than me, but he used to breed like colubrids and stuff, and that's how I got into it. And he was showing me stuff and telling me things like I was telling you yesterday about the two-headed snakes feeding both heads. That's the stuff you learn from these older people.
Yep.
And it just got me interested, and I just went off and got my first snake and went from there. And it grew because, I'll be honest with you, I was born with spinal bifida, and I used to be paralyzed, and I worked my way through that. Ooh. And the doctor told me I had to get some kind of hobby because of pain, because of pain management. They don't. The only thing they have is like opioids and stuff, and I don't take none of that. So when I'm down in my reptile room, it kind of takes my mind off it a little bit, and I spend some time down there, and it just helps go along.
So it was almost a necessity to find something, and this is what it was.
Yes.
Man, you could have found a lot worse. I'm glad you're into this hobby. Let's bring us to the next thing, which is, where do you see this industry going?
Oh, okay. It's constantly growing, and I don't see any end in sight because, people are finding out like reptiles are easier than dogs and cats.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can go away for a day and come back and not have to worry about feeding an animal right away or nothing. So I think it's going to grow. But I think the big change that's coming to the industry is because, you know, there's like the nidovirus and stuff like that. I really think the next step for keepers and hobbyists to be selling this stuff is providing tests to prove that their animals don't have the nidovirus. You know, it's only $35 to test your animal, and people would pay the extra $35 for an animal not to have it in their collection because, you know, Stephen Tillis, I don't know if you know who that is. He's a young guy, but he had this big collection of blood pythons and ball pythons and stuff, and he moved, and he found out some of his animals were getting sick, and here he tested his whole collection, and half of them carried the nidovirus, and they didn't show any signs at all. So there's so many people out there got these big collections with this virus in it, and they don't even know they have it. So I think the next big thing is going to be people testing for it and providing the results with every animal that they sell, so people don't bring it into their collection.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. But I don't know, like, I mean, if that's going to happen on every animal per se, because the guy that's buying a normal, you know, is getting his first snake, and, you know, I go to a show and I sell a normal on my table for $20. Is he going to be willing to pay $55 now for that normal? Well,
that's true.
You know,
but if you're just starting off, before you go invest a big amount of money into a big animal, you can test the ones you already have.
Truth.
Make sure you know.
I can see that there's certainly on large purchases, people wanting to do that. Or, you know, I mean, that'd be very interesting. See, somebody else is hungry, too. Do you want some of my food?
You want some
Rings?
Mine's better.
I would hope. Mine's a...
Sweet potatoes and shrimp and asparagus.
I got a plastic brain and a plastic heart and some eyeballs.
He's got some eyeballs, brain, and a heart.
And a fake blood.
Yeah, you keep that.
Oh, okay.
Bye.
That was my wife.
So yeah, I mean, I could see. I mean, definitely what you're saying. It'll be interesting because as that goes through and changes, you know, for me when I first came up, the scary thing was IBD, and I'm still to this day probably overly cautious and terrified of IBD.
Same here.
You know, like
same here.
I don't allow boas anywhere near my house.
I don't either.
People are like, oh, we rescued a boa. I treat it like it was in quarantine, and then I moved it to my camera guy's house because I don't want them in the same area. I don't want them, you know what I mean? And I know guys that keep both in the same room and no problems, but it just makes me so terrified because that boa can be such a carrier. And so I don't know, you know, if it'll be interesting to see what comes in the future too past Nido, because there's probably going to be
something else, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. There's always something that seems coming up to scare us.
I think a lot of people who have these huge collections would be surprised at how many animals have it and don't know it. Because Stephen Tillis, he went to college now, and this is what he works with is this stuff. And he learned by just studying it that unless the animal gets stressed or something, it may never show signs of it, but pass it on to other animals.
Right. That's interesting. That is very interesting. So now I got to figure out, there they went. For a second there, for whatever reason, my questions went away. Oh, there they're back. Had to scroll. Hit my computer, the cat did. So that brings us back to the next random question.
Okay.
It's good. These are always fun. What do you think we're going to get, Kurt?
Question.
Kurt says you're going to get a question. So this one is, oh my goodness, you're having bad luck. You're having very bad luck. And I got to put a disclaimer with this because as you're doing this, you haven't seen the video we just filmed. Everybody else has. So the question is, would you rather get bit by a rattlesnake or be ravaged by our Bigfoot? The thing is, we just murdered our Bigfoot. So he's kind of a zombie Bigfoot now, or he's a corpse. You can kind of pick how you want to go with that.
Probably neither, but if I had to choose, I think I could survive a rattlesnake bite.
I don't think I want to get ravaged by the Bigfoot. He's kind of hairy. I'm a little hairy, but that guy takes it to the extreme. But he's brainless now, so that's one thing. Now we're going to get into some of the questions that I picked specifically for you, from what I've seen, from what you're doing. And the first one is, you do a live almost every night. I want to know how you do that, because I think if I tried to do that, I don't know how I would sleep and I would be dead. Like, I don't know how you have the energy to do that.
Well, it's just, I don't know. I never thought about it. The wife says the same thing. She don't see how I could do that, but I do. I try to get them every night. For now, but for a few months, I took off for a few months there because of the summertime and stuff like that. But now I'm starting back up again, and I figure, about an hour a day isn't hard to do if you have time for it. But I don't know. The computer's right here, so I just sit down and do it, and then get it over with. It's not real. Never really thought about it before.
Man, I set a goal to do one a week, and I think I've been lucky to do one a month. Like, I'm trying to find the time. I just never seem to. So I just was curious, man, do you have it like set at a certain schedule? Or is it just something that's almost simple for you?
It just comes, everybody usually, by the time I do it, everybody's in bed except for usually the wife. So I just do it when everybody's doing their own thing. It's just sit down, and it's like a exit for me to some.
And they're really fun. They're really laid back, a good conversation. None of you have checked that out. You really should check one of those out when you get a chance. I pop in there a lot because it's just an enjoyable reptile conversation. Mostly, it's easy going. It's relaxed. I look forward to when I turn on my phone when I'm going to bed and I find that, and I can pop in for 10 or 15. That's always nice. Yeah. So the other thing is, I know you have a separate snake house as well, correct?
Correct.
So you're one of
I don't have everything over there yet, but yes, correct.
Neither do we. It's a work in progress. So I want to know how it's coming, and if you found any benefits or pitfalls. I think you got your reptile house before we even got ours. So you're probably a little further along into that, and I'm looking to learn from you on this.
Well, the only problem I have is that it's not in my house, because I always worry about stuff. Mm-hmm. But, anything could happen. You got to have monitors everywhere, because something could happen and you not even know.
Right.
Like a thermostat go out or something like that. But it's just the whole. I think it's better over there. It would be, when I got everything over there, it'll be much better due to the fact that, I think it would be easier. I could have more room to move and do things. It's better than just a small little room or something. Spread out easier.
Yeah.
It's, and if somebody wants to come and see something, it's easier for me to take them over there than through my whole house and into the basement. And it's just easier that way, I guess.
It is. It's funny because I heard, and you and I can kind of pick on these guys if we want. I think it was Garrett Hartle and Cusco on a video talking about, what business they were filming under, because they were filming together. And they made the joke that we really all just pretend to have a business, but it's really just a room in our house. I'm like, not me and DEA. We got an entire house for that shit. That's right. That means we're like the only two legit ones, right? The rest of them are just.
The only reason we got the house, though, was because the lady next door was really old and she passed away, and the family didn't want anything to do with the house. And the property line comes 7 inches from my house here. So I figured we better buy it so that way nobody throws a fence up.
And it's funny because it's not too far from our story. Our neighbor didn't die, but our house was literally the house right next door, and she'd been there for a few years, said it wasn't for her, and so she sold it to us before it ever went on the market for a really great price. It was a great blessing because she thought it was really cool what we were trying to do with it, so she kind of hooked us up, and it's been wonderful. Now we're out in the country, so there's some space. I got a little more than 7 inches, but it's kind of funny. It's the same thing. Neighbor lady said, for whatever reason, whether it was nature or just time to go, and that's who we ended up buying it from. That's pretty awesome.
And another benefit of having it is I can get things over there that my wife would never let me get in the house over here.
Damn right. There's a Gaboon Viper in mine.
Yeah.
And that was a no-go in the house.
No, I was just saying, with having when we move all the reptiles and everything completely next door, if I wanted to get something that you would never let in the house, would be fine because it's next door.
Depends on what it is.
Yeah, well, still, but
yeah. See, she's got that special wife here, and as soon as she hears you say the wife, boom, she tunes in, right?
Yeah.
I've been married twice now. I know how that goes. It's better just to do it once if you can, though. So the next one is another random question. You're almost out of the woods. We got 2 more of these to go. You get into there and get to the bottom. Ugh. Let's see what we have. Oh, this is an easy one. You got off the hook finally. This one is Where's Waldo?
Where's Waldo?
Where's Waldo?
He's right over here.
See, we do the user suggestions when we get a question like, where's Waldo? So this was one from Kurt. I let Kurt come up with one, and he wanted to know if you're an undercover cop or does DEA mean something else?
DEA means something else. DEA stands for David, Emma, and Andrew. My 3 children, in the order that they were born.
Okay.
And the wife came up with the name.
Well, I like it because I'm in law enforcement, so right away when I saw that, I was like, "Is this guy prior law enforcement or like I don't know."
I get that question all the time.
All right, then this one is from me, and I want to know your thoughts because you've been in this industry, like you said, for 35 years, and that means you've seen a lot of things come and you've seen a lot of things go. You've been through pretty much everything there is before the ball python market was even a market. When they were they used to be kind of almost a throwaway snake, really.
Well, when we had the store, they were considered the junk snake. That's exactly what they were sold as, the junk snake.
Yep.
Because first off, they all came from the wild. They were hard to get eaten. They all came with ticks. They all came with mites. It was just a disaster. Mm-hmm. But then I often wonder how many of them snakes, because ball pythons, people really weren't looking for different looks for them all. How many of them were different and nobody really paid attention? And they went to some kid somewhere,
Yeah, there was a gold mine that probably got sold as junk.
Yep.
But my question is scaleless. So, is this scaleless has been out for a while, or it's been more produced, and it's still kind of this topic. And I want to know, is scaleless, is it a thing, or is it the next gene that everyone's going to love to hate?
I don't think it's going to, it's been around for a while now.
Right.
And the price is still pretty high on some of that stuff. But they don't appeal to me.
Okay.
They just don't look like a snake to me, I guess. I mean, they are, but to me, scales is where it's at, I guess you could say. I'm not sure. But I don't think it's going to be, I think they're going to be there, but I think they're going to find it maybe. They say there's no problems with them yet, but I'm still up in the air about it a little bit. Because, the scales are on the animal for a reason.
Absolutely.
And I think they've said they shed more and everything like that. That could be because they could get scrapes or anything like that. And then they have problems shedding, too, some of them.
Yes.
I'm not saying they all do, but I just think, it's just a little more work than is needed for it.
I think they are going to be a little more work. I totally agree with you. I think that it kind of makes me think of the silky bearded dragons.
Yes.
There was some really good videos done by Constriction Addiction, who went through the whole shedding process. He's actually using a little bit of a balm on them in the whole 9 yards. So very much like the silkies. And one of the things he noted was that sometimes they'll roll it off. I call it the used condom look, where it kind of rolls up into a, yeah, we all guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And he's had to clip that before to let them to shed out. But otherwise, other than the shedding aspect, they survive fine. Now, I do agree, the scales, in the nature, they would have to be, get out of here, cat. They're there for protection. For obvious reasons, they're going to prevent scratches and micro cuts, and they're going to prevent getting infections and things that would kill you in the wild because they're crawling on their belly and they're going through brush and things like that. In captivity, not as big of a concern. I will say that's a snake I think that definitely you're going to want to switch to frozen thawed if you ever keep them. And I'm a guy that everybody knows, love or hate it. I do a lot of live feeding. I think we get a better feed response. But I think that is a snake that is going to be more susceptible to damage from not so much as a bite, but a scratch.
Yeah, well, if you throw a rat in there and a rat just runs over it, rat has claws, it's going to leave marks on it all the way,
Right.
I would think it would scratch it up, so.
And that cut gets infected.
The bedding you use could scratch it, I would think.
Yes, you have to pick your bedding and pick what you're using for hides. I think they look really cool. I don't have a scaleless ball. I'm kind of hoping they do well. I've got some projects I'm working. It wasn't about the money. It was more about how clean of a look can I get with that in Exantic. That's what it was for me. And I got the scaleless Western Diamondback that I think is the coolest snake in the world. And we just recently switched him to frozen because he was on live from birth. But I wanted to get him to frozen, even though it's not as big of a concern. He's not coiling, but just so I don't have to worry about it. So he's now tongue feeding frozen, which when I got him wasn't going to happen. He was hard to get going. He wasn't very trusting. But him and I are buds now, as well as much of a bud as you can be with a Western Diamondback, which is that much. But he's doing a lot better on that.
I mean, I do think they're cool looking. It's just, I just think it would be a lot of work if you had a bunch of them.
I do too. I think it's.
I just feel.
I agree. I don't want a bunch, but it is something I want to work and have in my collection. But I do think they are going to take a little more work, especially on the humidity and the shedding, and maybe putting a little lotion on them. Definitely, I definitely agree with that. I think they're viable, but I don't know if they're going to catch, like the hate that spiders caught over the last year.
Which was ridiculous because they're totally fine.
I know.
I have 5 spiders, I think it is, and only one of them have a wobble. Only one.
Yep.
And I got that one as an adult, so it had a wobble when I got it.
And it's probably still functioning perfectly, right?
Perfectly fine. It eats fine. It gave me a clutch this year, no problems.
Yeah. And then I get people that
head wobble.
They get so worried about like, well, how do you think that snake feels? I'm like, well, it's not a person, so it's not worried about going out in public with a stutter. Like, it doesn't care.
I'll tell you what.
We're not,
you know what these animals have on their mind?
well, go ahead. I'll say the same thing I got.
My thought on their mind is food, shelter,
Yep.
and eating. That's it.
Yep. And breeding. I throw breeding in there occasionally.
Well, yeah. Oh, that's what I meant to say, breeding. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Because I always tell people there's 3 modes in a snake. The I'm hungry and I can eat that.
Oh, food and a Humpty Hump is what she said.
Yeah.
That's what they have on their mind.
So I always say, I'm hungry, I can eat that. I'm comfortable, don't care. And that's when they're just kind of exploring around on you. They're in their hide, chilling, or they feel secure. Or I'm terrified, and that's when they're going to be nippy. Or I can breed with that. That's pretty much all the goes through their head. Same thing you're kind of saying. So,
Well,
absolutely.
People seem to think they have an intellectual mind, and they don't.
I find that fascinating that they're so built on just instinctual survival. It is an amazing animal. They really are on that. And they're very, very good at it. It's not, I don't always equate it to intelligence because it's a different kind of intelligence altogether. It's not what we think of as I can do arithmetic, but they are so, if you look at what they've been able to do on some of the studies with snakes, with the way their body works when food isn't plentiful and how they can control that metabolism, they're just a wild, amazing creature that's good at surviving. And, that's what they're wired for.
Take a look at retics. They have them, polygenic or parthenogenic clutches. That's because all they got on their mind is spreading the genetics.
Yep, spreading the species.
Yep. And they're smart. Retics are smart, don't get me wrong. But they're always thinking of, how can I get out of this cage? See?
Yeah. I watched an anaconda, too, open its own cage once on video.
Yep.
Because it was our anaconda. We kept at the shop, and it got out. And we let's put on the security camera, find where it went. We watched it open its own cage, and then it went into the wall. And it was in the wall for, a month, Kurt? And we had to finally say, okay, you got to come out. We had to cut the wall and drag this anaconda out. It wasn't a very happy anaconda.
I suppose not.
But it taught me something. That snake found a perfectly comfortable spot where it said, hey, I'm hidden, and I feel secure, and it just stayed happier than a clam. It could have got out anytime it wanted,
Yeah, once it wanted food, you would have found it out somewhere. But
Yeah. And, because we have a rat breeding facility right there, and usually there's rabbits. It could have found food. But they just sit. It just, and so they will find that tight, secure spot and be, and they're most content there. So, all right, that brings us to our last question, then I'll let you off the hook. And it is another Viking random question. May it be a good one. I hope you don't get an easy one. I'm not a big fan of the easy ones. I'm going to throw the easy ones out of here.
I'm gonna take it.
This is not too bad. What's the weirdest place you found your balls?
Which ones?
It's an open question. You can answer however you want. But be careful, your wife's still sitting behind you. So
Yeah, okay, so I'll refer that to Reptiles. Yes. No, I had one get out once, and we searched for a whole week. I thought it went up in the crawl space, and here it was sitting. I was sitting and I heard it crash, and I went down, and it was just sitting right on top of the other cages. They don't travel far, but ball python gets out, it's within 10 to 15 feet of its cage.
yeah, it's amazing. It's
So
crammed in the tightest spot, 10 to 15 feet away. You can tear a whole house apart. And then, you can almost just open the cage and probably crawl back in within a few days.
probably looking for heat or something, yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, if you've never watched DEA Exotics, you definitely need to go check them out. Make sure and check out their live videos when they do them. It's a ton of fun. I'll probably pop in there from time to time, and it's just great, and it's a good community. I want to say thanks for letting us have you on here for interview.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, guys, we'll catch you next week.